Back in February of this year, I made a video entitled, A Game Developer's Open Letter to Anita Sarkeesian. At the time, I hoped that Ms. Sarkeesian was sincere in her expressed love for video games, and that she was genuinely hoping to spark a discussion about the portrayal of women in them. As a lifelong gamer and developer with a couple decades of professional experience, I offered to engage with her in a respectful dialogue regarding any of the topics she had raised in her Tropes vs. Women series. I never heard anything from Ms. Sarkeesian. Since I am a small channel, it is completely plausible that she simply didn't take any interest. However, since that time, I have been forced to reconsider my original assessment of Ms. Sarkeesian's motives. In my June video, entitled The Legacy of Tropes vs. Women, I noted that she had since clarified her position regarding video games when she said in a published article that it's never been about video games, it's always about social justice. In that same video, I included this bit of further analysis. She has shown herself to be especially allergic to criticism. For example, when one of her longtime critics opted to attend a public panel where she was speaking in the hopes of being able to engage with her or ask a few questions, here was her response.
If you Google my name on YouTube, you get shitheads like this dude who are making these dumbass videos that just say the same shit over and over again. And like, I hate to give you attention because you're a garbage human. Whatever, dude.
But if there is any doubt as to how Anita views those who disagree with her, she made herself very clear in this CBC interview.
Were you ever able to have a conversation with any of your critics?
They are not critics, they're harassers.
Yeah.
So we'll be very clear on that issue. And no, I have no interest in talking to them.
And so, somewhat reluctantly, I've had to acknowledge that I was in error regarding Ms. Sarkeesian's intentions. My charitable hope was misplaced. I was wrong. Now, some commenters on my other videos dealing with the impact of feminist frequency on gaming have expressed their frustrations with Ms. Sarkeesian. I understand them, but for me, my counterpoints have never been about her personally. Rather, they have always been about the ideological positions she promotes. Ms. Sarkeesian, as a person, is irrelevant. In my view, she is much like Jack Thompson, simply another portrait in the gallery of outrage warriors that seek to censor or shame forms of media that they personally don't appreciate. In other words, my criticisms would be the same if Ms. Sarkeesian's former boyfriend and long-term collaborator, Jonathan McIntosh, had rose to public prominence instead of her. This is why I have engaged in no name-calling and no personal attacks in my videos. I am concerned only with the propagation of incorrect and often harmful ideas about gaming and gamers. In the past few months, Ms. Sarkeesian's feminist frequency has moved on from her attacks on video games to advance her social justice causes in a new series called The Freak Show. Thus far, her new venture appears to have been far less notable, with a viewership of about only 10% of what it was before. Although, perhaps recognizing her steep decline in media relevance, she still pops up from time to time via stunts, such as attempting to compare the Harvey Weinstein sexual misconduct allegations to Gamergate. But, for the time being at least, Ms. Sarkeesian has piloted her ship of social justice and sailed on. Unfortunately, the anti-gamer ideology sparked by feminist frequency continues. These days, it is being fueled by misguided and irresponsible press outlets. It's as though the ideas originally promoted by feminist frequency were an oil spill, and even though she's now left the area, gamers have been left to battle the toxic residue left behind by her tanker of outrage. The modern press narratives take inspiration from feminist frequency's blaming of gaming to implicate gamers not only in misogyny, but now also in racism, and even in the election of Donald Trump. Supporting this narrative requires its proponents to maintain a willful ignorance of the facts. Which is why I'm here. With this video, I am offering myself as a resource to journalists, online pundits, or media outlets to provide an informed and fact-based counterpoint to those common anti-gamer narratives. So in that spirit, please feel free to share this video with any persons or groups who espouse such a position. And although some of my critics have said that I should keep my opinions to myself because most of the games I've worked on have been aimed at kids, I feel that the non-controversial nature of my development history allows me to speak my mind without the fear of being maligned as being part of the alleged problem or of having an M-rated gaming agenda. I am simply a developer who cares about gaming and gamers. So here are 3 examples of the common anti-gamer media narratives that I am looking to counteract. Narrative number 1. Gamers are misogynists or racists.
Gaming culture has always been racist, it's always been sexist, but the internet has sort of allowed us to just sort of see what has always been there.
Much like this quote from Emma Voss, taken from the disastrously bad NBC hit piece on gamers, in their zeal for promoting identity politics, some poorly informed media pundits have tried to recast the label of gamer into being a sort of umbrella term exclusively targeting white males. By so doing, they use the term gamer as a sort of thinly veiled epithet to promote a false narrative of long-standing sexism and racism in gaming. But this neologism isn't based in fact. Being a gamer is a label of self-identification that has nothing to do with your skin color or your sex. It is more like being a fan of sports. In exactly the same way you decide if you want to be regarded as a fan of, say, baseball or soccer, you can decide if you want to be called a gamer or not. My position is that gaming has always been welcoming to players of all races, sexes, and cultures, and its broad appeal has only continued to grow in accordance with its rising popularity over time. As more kinds of games have become available in the marketplace, more gamers have found something they like. This is why, with the rise of mobile and social media gaming, roughly half the players out there are now women, and many of them are perfectly happy to wear the gamer label. It requires an almost unfathomable level of cognitive dissonance to push a narrative that gaming is hostile to women on the one hand, while simultaneously proclaiming that the number of women who play are more numerous than men on the other. I contend that the rise of online gaming has actually made the appeal even broader. Because of the ability to customize your character's appearance, nobody on the other side of the screen knows your sex or race unless you choose to reveal it to them. Your personal characteristics are irrelevant in the gaming sphere. All that really matters is your interest and your skill. Sure, if you go hunting for it, you can find some exceptions where some small groups of gamers are acting like racist or sexist jerks. But games have already provided tools to mute or block or even ban those players. Finally, and what should be the nail in the coffin for this false narrative, comes from this Pew Research study. It shows that in the US, minorities are actually more likely than whites to self-identify as gamers. Calling oneself a gamer is about 50% more likely among blacks and nearly 3 times more likely among Hispanics. So if you're going by the numbers, a glib response to the "gamers are racist" narrative might be, what do you have against blacks and Hispanics? Narrative number 2. Game development is hostile towards women and minorities. Much like the first narrative, this invention attempts to say that not only are the people who play games infected by racism and misogyny, but so too are the developers who make the games. And once again, this narrative is countermanded by the facts. In truth, game development has a long history of being very open to celebrating the talents of people of any race or sex. To see evidence of this, one need only look at the tremendous and ongoing influence of Asians, especially the Japanese, in the rise and expansion of video gaming. Both Nintendo and Sony are primarily Japanese companies. Some of gaming's most recognized mascots, such as Mario, or Link from The Legend of Zelda, were invented by Japanese developer Shigeru Miyamoto. If anything, your average gamer or game developer is more likely to be extolling the virtues of their friends in Asia than in demeaning them based on race. Furthermore, the assertion that game development is sexist against women does a grave disservice to the many female developers who have been widely recognized for their positive impact. This includes luminaries such as Carol Shaw, who helped to catapult Activision to success via her game River Raid, to Donna Bailey, who designed and programmed the arcade game Centipede, to Roberta Williams, who was a driving force behind the development of the adventure game genre via titles like King's Quest, to Kim Swift, who led the teams responsible for Portal and Left 4 Dead. Indeed, the first recipient of the Game Development Lifetime Achievement Award was transgender woman Danny Bunton Berry, who pioneered both online gaming as well as almost single-handedly invented the real-time strategy genre that comprises a major portion of esports today. Talented women like these underscore the fact that good development doesn't have anything to do with what sex you are, but rather is based entirely upon how good you are. These women of excellence also make the case that many of those others who vociferously complain about not being respected due purely to their sex turn out instead to be purely lacking in development talent. Finally, the notion that development is hostile to women is defeated by the observation that, as more and more women have come to play games, there has been a correspondingly rapid growth in those who work in development. An IGDA poll of developers shows that, even as a percentage, the number of women working in the industry has more than doubled in the past decade and shows no sign of slowing down. As the market has grown, so too have the opportunities. So rather than angrily telling game developers that they need to change their games to make them more hospitable to female players, or pundits like Ms. Sarkeesian, the correct message is that video games are already advancing diversity and inclusion through market expansion. The facts show that, regardless of sex or race, everyone is welcome as both a gamer and as a game developer. Narrative number 3. Gamergate was primarily about harassing women. From the inception of Gamergate in August of 2014, right up until the present day in November of 2017, the common media narrative is that Gamergate was a loosely organized mob of angry white male gamers bent upon harassing women with the intent of chasing them out of the gaming sphere. The modern narrative has retroactively added a new spin that Gamergate was also about promoting white supremacy, even though no such accusations existed 3 years ago. But again, the facts are antithetical to this oft-promoted narrative. Here are 3 points that illustrate that. First, in response to complaints, the FBI Cybercrimes Division opened an investigation into Gamergate to see if there was any actual credibility to the claims of orchestrated threats or harassment. After a few months, they closed their investigation, noting that they found only isolated cases of a handful of people engaging in anything resembling criminal behavior, and that the Gamergate label was irrelevant in building their case against those few. Second, the independent organization Women, Action, and the Media cooperated with Twitter to track all of the complaints of harassment it received during the very height of when Gamergate was supposedly at its worst, back in the fall of 2014. They discovered that most reports implicated only a very few accounts, usually coming from only a single alleged harasser, and that of those, about 90% turned out to be completely unaffiliated with Gamergate. Third, an attempt at blacklisting every account that was even distantly affiliated with Gamergate via a program called GG Autoblocker logged nearly 10,000 supporters. Upon review, only 65 of those accounts were flagged as having anything to do with harassment, or well less than 1%. So, if the facts demolish the media narrative of it being a campaign of harassment, what is Gamergate actually about? The answer can be summed up in 2 succinct bullet points. A. Consumers looking to raise consciousness and accountability regarding journalism and business practices within the gaming sphere. This concern led to boycotts of magazines and game publishers who were suspected of acting unethically. The ethical breaches included things such as publishers bribing journalists to provide them with better reviews of their products, or game reviewers being discovered to have financially invested in some of the games on which they later reported. Some media personalities have tried to make light of this ethics in game journalism concern as being trivial. A worthy counterpoint to that position is to simply note that, by some estimates, video game revenues now eclipse that of both movies and music combined. With that much money in the business, consumer concerns about maintaining ethical behavior are well-founded. B. Players concerned about the infusion of social justice and identity politics into gaming. Gamers noticed that pundits, such as Ms. Sarkeesian, were being given a platform to call for changes in video games that they didn't play or otherwise really care much about, in order to make them more palatable to their social justice causes. In response, many gamers wanted to make sure that their viewpoints on the subject were also being heard by the developers. These gamers were, after all, the primary audience of the same games that were now being excoriated as being unacceptably sexist. Although they had to fight against the slanderous and inaccurate media narrative, the Gamergate movement proved to be surprisingly successful in getting their voices heard. For example, the current and effective pushback against EA's Loot Crate system in Battlefront 2 is a direct outgrowth of the network of gamers that coalesced to form Gamergate. Finally, another salient point about Gamergate is simply to note how many of those self-described male feminists who took a position in opposition to the movement have subsequently been accused of sexual crimes or harassment themselves. It would appear that being prominently anti-Gamergate was intended to be a sort of camouflage to hide these men's true colors. Indeed, the problem has now become so pronounced that one might be forgiven of thinking that being opposed to Gamergate is an actual risk factor in later being revealed as being a sex offender. I want to close this video by noting that not only am I willing to speak out as a counterpoint to some of the negative narratives being propagated about gaming and gamers by the less responsible media outlets, but that I am also ready to promote some fact-based positives. For example, I am willing to defend my position that video games are the most egalitarian form of entertainment ever created, or my position that video games are the ultimate art form that will eventually come to subsume all others. But in the end, my main point is simply this. Video gaming is a fantastic pastime, hobby, or lifestyle. It is on the whole a net positive in the world. No one needs to be ashamed of saying that gaming plays a significant part of enriching their lives. It is okay to be a gamer. So game on, my friends!